There we are. Yes, live again. I love it. It's been a whole of 2 weeks since we've been online, so I'm all pumped up, ready to go, get this particular dojo started. For those of you guys that are joining us from the West Coast, I guess it would be what? It's, I guess, late morning for you guys, just after breakfast, so hopefully you've had an opportunity to have your whatever it is that you do for breakfast. For those of us here on the East Coast, we just finished our lunch. So as you guys know, if you've seen me before, anytime I do something after lunch, just a tad bit hyper. But it's all good because that's why you guys join in live, because you want...
It's a little bit contagious, actually. The hyperness. It's
better be. See how he's talking out of turn without even being introduced? But that's fine. We'll get there. We'll get there. No, I'm just kidding. So, for today, just to make sure that you are actually at the right place, today we're talking about porting Android apps to Windows Phone with none other than Monsieur Remy. Now, I say Monsieur because he's actually French. He claims he's French, but you can't tell when he's talking.
Yeah, I don't really have an accent, but I am from Montreal and I do speak French, so if you ever wanted to tweet at me in French, go right ahead and I'll be happy to respond.
There you go. Remy Sayar. R-A-M-I-S-A-Y-A-R, which I usually always screw up and put E-R. So feel free to reach out to him if you are indeed French speaking. He loves that. It challenges him.
Please.
You guys know that I try to do the French talk, and I love French, and I used to talk French all the time. And then I kind of forgot it all, so I don't know if you want to have that conversation with me, but you can with Remy.
Me, you can. No.
Yeah. Having said that, I mean, he's going to introduce himself shortly, but before he does that, developer movement, okay, Code Kwando. So last time you guys were on with us, I was showing you a test site, and well, that was interesting because some things worked, some things didn't, and then you saw everything in French. But the good news is that today it is live. Yep. That's right, live. And in English. I had to. I wanted to just see if I can trip him up. You guys are going to see that throughout the entire event today. But as you can see, the esteemed Code Sensei is right behind us. And the theme for this year's developer movement, right, is all about mastering the art of code. And it's actually super exciting because, you know, like last year, it was really cool. You joined the developer movement and you did something. You built apps, you put them in the Windows Phone store, you put them in the Windows Store, you got really cool prizes. If you check all the tweets that were happening, especially towards, it was July, I think, everybody was starting to get all their rewards and everyone's happy.
He was very excited.
Yeah. All I have to say is that the rewards for this year's developer movement and Code Kwando, so much better. So much better. But before we go into those, how do you actually get them? So here's the deal, right? With Code Kwando, you're working towards building various different belts. Okay, so you start off different levels, and as you publish your apps for Windows 8 and Windows Phone, or Windows Phone, ideally but either or, and especially if you put a back end for them up in Windows Azure, you start accumulating different points for different things. And also, relatively new this year, is there's a little bit of a training component in there for you that you can actually get bonus points for doing as well. So that's various different courses that you could do on Microsoft Virtual Academy, MVA for short, because Virtual Academy is way too long, and whoever came up with that name, love you dearly, but way too long to say. So you take your courses, and you submit your little transcript thing. It's really cool, like a PDF, and then you get 5,000 points.
That's awesome.
5,000 points just for doing training.
I wish I was an evangelist just so I could do developer movements. But I can't, unfortunately.
It's like going to school.
Yeah,
but
just cooler and much more fun.
And you're not paying to go to school.
And not paying, and free, yeah.
Just saying. Anyway, so let's actually take a quick look at what those rewards are. We'll bring them up here, and then we'll show it to you guys just over here. Okay, so check this out. I mean, as much as shaker bottles are cool and stuff like that, and obviously we start with 1,000 points, if we scroll a little bit further down, check it out. $25 Windows App Store gift card. That's kind of cool. I'm going to bypass all the other coolness and just go straight down to here to the part that I love. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to expand that just a bit. Right? Check it out. Surface 2. Yeah. Wow. Surface 2. Xbox. Xbox One, Xbox 360, Xbox Wireless controllers, Xbox everything, Asus ZenBooks, right? Like, how could you not want to build apps? It boggles my mind that.
Yeah. And when you've got all this amazing stuff that's
Right?
it's on play, like it's just
Right. So, and the beauty of it is that we're actually here to help you do that.
That's right.
So while you typically would think, hey, you know what, developer movement or Microsoft in general, yeah, we're just going to go in and build Windows Phone apps and Windows 8 apps out of the blue. But as you saw last time, here's an opportunity that we went through this with Mickey McDonald in terms of bringing over Unity apps onto Windows Phone and Windows 8, right? In case you're already doing that. Today we're going to go through the same kind of concept, but today we're going to go through porting Android apps to Windows Phone. So basically, what is that to say? It's to say you don't have to think of something net new.
yeah.
Right.
If you've already got an app, it's quite easy. We'll show you how to port it to Windows Phone.
Right, and that's the beauty of it. So why capitalize on just one market when you can bring on and kind of go at 2 markets, and then eventually 3 markets if you port that over to Windows 8, which we'll get into in another dojo. So really what we're saying here is that in theory, if you pay attention to last dojo, which by the way is actually available for you on demand right now on Channel 9, if you don't know how to get there, just go on to channel9.msdn.com, do a search at the top there for Code Kwando. Since it's a really cool title, there are no other videos on there for Code Kwando, so you won't get confused. And watch it. We had a really good time last time, and my shirt's not see-through this time. Though I'm actually kind of disappointed about that because I really enjoyed playing with that. So that was Unity. Today we're going to do that. So you know what? Without further ado, why don't I stop talking, other than saying, hey, Developer Movement is live now. Okay, so head over to developermovement.ca. Make sure you sign up. Obviously, signing up is free, but I had to say that. And start building those apps. And if you have an existing app, then make sure that you're paying attention to my friend Rami over here, because he's going to show you how in the next, 2.5 hours or so?
Yeah, just about.
We're going to make your life of porting apps super simple.
That's right.
No pressure or anything.
Oh, no. Well, believe me, it's super easy. So you'll see as we go through this, it's not very hard to take your existing native Android app and port it over to Windows Phone. So I guess a little bit about me.
We should do that.
Yeah, like who am I? Where do I come from? Well, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, I come from Montreal. That also means I went to school there. So I went to McGill University, did computer engineering. At school, I was a big fan of all of these coding competitions, including Developer Movement. I actually did Developer Movement when I was still in school.
Tum tum
Tum
tum.
tum tum.
That's why you know that it's as good as it is.
It is awesome. It is awesome. But one of the other things that I did at school was actually I started this competition called the McGill Code Jam, which is still going on 4 years later. Yay! Very happy about that. And after that, I worked in a little bit in San Francisco doing some back-end development as well. I did the same thing in Montreal. Normally, I code in Python, JavaScript, HTML5, Node.js.
So basically everything I do.
Basically everything, yeah. Everything that, that Jonathan doesn't code in.
I'm a C-sharp guy.
Yeah, so I do all of the open source languages, and I have a fairly active profile on GitHub. You can check it out at github.com/sayar. And if you've got questions and you want to reach out to me, my Twitter handle is just @RamiSayar. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. First thing, for the Android developers who are coming from other platforms like Mac OS or Linux, what I'm going to do is do a quick overview of the development ecosystem on Windows, as well as what requirements you need to get up and running. After that, we're going to look at Visual Studio and compare it to Android Studio and see how the tools and the functionality is more or less the same, if not even more powerful in Visual Studio. Because I know Android developers are almost entirely Java, there's a few who do some of the native SDK stuff, but most Android native apps are actually in Java. I will do a quick introduction to C# for Java developers. So I'll compare and contrast, and you'll see the differences. Very small differences here and there, but for the most part, you can pick it up real quick. Following that, we'll do a little bit of an overview of the Windows Phone platform as a whole, what's available, what are the features that you can use, what is the functionality that is there. We'll talk a little bit about transferring your existing tool sets to Windows. We'll do a comparison of the Android app lifecycle to Windows Phone. And finally, we'll actually do a small port of a sample app from Android to Windows Phone.
Hey, Remy,
Yeah.
before we get into the goodness of the agenda, I totally forgot to mention that this is live. I mean,
This is live,
you guys
yeah.
know that, but the reason why I wanted to say that it's live is, guess what? I have a chat right in front of my screen. So as Remy's going through things, and obviously because you guys aren't here, feel free to post questions in the chat. I'll make sure to, it will actually be my pleasure to interrupt him on your behalf.
And he will interrupt me.
I will.
Just as I try to interrupt him as much as possible.
Yes,
but
please do.
He will do a much better job than I will.
Quite big. Quite big. Make sure you get those questions over to me. And actually, you know what? Even if it's not a question, post your comments, questions, qualms, quirks, quibbles, concerns, opinions. I think I covered them all. Chat amongst yourselves, obviously, as we're kind of rambling on here. And actually, if you're then going to watch this on demand, or if you are watching this on demand on Channel 9 or YouTube, just post your questions over there in the comments field right underneath the video, and Remy and I will make sure that we get back to you with whatever you want to know. So with that, back to you.
All right.
Now that I've done my piece, back to you.
Okay, so for the Android developers that are not on the Windows platform, things are a little bit different on Windows land. For one, there's Visual Studio and Windows Phone development only works on Windows. So if you're coming from Linux, Mac, or Windows machine, you just have to move to Windows. If you're already on Windows, you don't need to do anything. In terms of IDEs, the most popular tool for Android development is Eclipse and Android Studio. Well, the equivalent for that on the Windows platform is Visual Studio. And in the same way, the Android SDKs, we also have a Windows Phone SDK, and there's several of them. The one that you'll want to pay attention to is the 8.0 SDK. That's the latest one that we've got out right now. So let's get that all set up. If you don't have Visual Studio, you can actually get a free version of it that works very well for just developing Windows Phone apps. What you want to do is you want to actually download the Windows Phone SDK 8.0. This will include all the tools that you need, including Microsoft Visual Studio Express 2012. So it's not the latest 2013 that was released last week. It's the 2012 version. With that, you'll get all the Windows Phone project templates. You'll get all of the tools, the emulator, everything that you need to get up and running. Now, if you already have Visual Studio 2012 Professional or higher, including 2013, when you install the Windows Phone SDK, all that tool sets, those templates, those sample projects will get integrated into your existing installation. So you won't have to work with Visual Studio Express if you don't want to. One thing to note, though, that the Phone SDK requires you to have a 64-bit version of Windows, 8 Pro or higher. If you've got 8.1, you're all set, 64-bit, it's ready to go. Now, the emulator itself, you can still develop apps without the emulator and just run things on a device. But for the emulator itself, you need to have a few requirements filled in your machine. First of all, in the BIOS, you've got to enable hardware-assisted virtualization. So if you haven't got that already enabled for another emulator or not, what you want to do is probably after this presentation, reboot your machine, go into the BIOS, find the VirtX setting somewhere in the BIOS menus. I know on some machines it's disabled by default, but most machines do have it. It's somewhere hidden in the BIOS. You want to enable it. And once you've got that running in Windows, you want to make sure that Hyper-V is also enabled and running, and that your user is a member of the local Hyper-V administration group.
So you know I'm going to ask a question here.
All right.
Just because you put it in, well, it's so simple. Reboot, go into your BIOS, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is actually a lot of times many people don't know the whole SLAT business and whatever. There are tons of tutorials online that basically go through detailed what Remy just kind of went. So just do a search for SLAT, and you'll probably find that. And also, because you talked about the tools, and I feel compelled to tell everybody that even though you could probably do all of this stuff with the Express, you said, right?
Yes.
Yes, you said.
Express, yes.
I know my tools. What is actually cool about this kind of stuff is if you happen to be a student, right?
This is something awesome, man.
Okay, if you happen to be a student, you have actually access to DreamSpark, which is a program specifically for students to give you full access to tools so that you don't have to use the Express ones. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but the Professional and the Ultimate are obviously much better. So if you don't know if you have DreamSpark or anything like that, send us a tweet, send us an email. We'll make sure to help you, but that way you can use the full tools that you're not having to use the Express. Same thing for startups, by the way. And this is the part that I love. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm stealing a little bit of the. He's looking at me like, dude, I need to continue on. No, it was just because he got onto the tools discussion.
No.
Okay.
BizSpark is awesome. If you're a startup in Canada, just shoot Mark_Gani a tweet, and he'll make sure that he's got you on inside the BizSpark program. It comes with Visual Studio. It comes with Windows 8, so an MSDN subscription for up to 5 people, and it's just awesome.
I was going to do the pitch, but here we go.
Here we go.
The truth of the matter is, though, is what people don't realize is that, hey, if you're building apps, guess what? You're a startup.
Yeah,
right?
you are.
And a lot of people don't necessarily think that because
you gotta
it's
do
like
marketing, deployment, all this stuff.
And you can actually make money off your apps.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, back to you.
All right.
I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, so speaking of SLAT, basically PCs that do support SLAT, if you've got an Intel-based processor that starts with I something, it supports SLAT. Or if you've got a CPU that's based on NehalM, Westmere, or SandBridge microarchitectures, it will work. And if you want to find out if it does, you can download a very simple and awesome tool called Core Info. Run that in your command line, right? And this is the type of output that you'll see. You'll see that if you can support the Windows 8 emulator, it'll show EPT supports Intel extended page tables. If you don't see that, well, it's a little bit harder to well, you won't be able to run the emulator. It's not hard at all. It's very clear. And to find out if it does support it, you can see in the screenshots, it's going to have a little star. So once you've got all that tools installed, all that set up, what you want to do is you actually want to get a Windows Phone developer account. Now, you don't need it to download the SDK and start developing apps, but you do need it if you want to unlock a phone for development or if you want to submit apps to the store. Now, to get a developer account, if you've got an MSDN subscription, it's already included. If you're a student, it's free to students through the DreamSpark program. If you're just an individual developer, the cost is right now, I believe, $20 a year, which is awesome. Now, to register an account, it's just dev.windowsphone.com, and you're good to go. That's the link where you'll get all this wonderful stuff. So, if you've got a phone, you want to register it for development. Otherwise, you won't be able to test on the device itself. So it's quite easy to do that. Once you've signed up for your developer account, you can register your phone. And to do that, you definitely need to have a Microsoft account. In fact, you need that to get a developer account on the Windows Phone Store. And once you've got that, this is what the Dev Center looks like. To register your phone, you got to go into the All Apps view. So I'll actually do it right away so that you can see it.
I sense a demo.
A demo. And we've already started in the demos.
Here we go.
So if I go into the All Apps and I scroll to the Windows Phone SDK.
Not that you have a lot of apps installed on your computer anymore.
And it's right here. It's Windows Phone Developer. It's cut off, but if you hover over, it says Windows Phone Developer Registration. You open up this app. And using this app, you will be able, well, first of all, you'll get this nice, fancy dialog. Not really fancy, but it's fairly straightforward. It'll see if there's a device connected. You will be able to register it once you've got a status message that says identified Windows Phone 8 device. You click the button that says register. You sign in to your Microsoft account, and ta-da, congratulations. You have successfully unlocked your Windows Phone and registered it with the Windows Phone dev account.
Just that simple.
Just that simple. So without further ado, once you've got all these tool sets installed, I'm going to show you Visual Studio, and I'm going to compare it to Android Studio and show you the differences.
I love it. Comparing and contrasting.
Yes, and we're already starting with the demos. It's awesome. So I actually went and set up a app in Android Studio, and I'm going to show it to you. It's a very simple app. I'm not going to delve into the code right now. I'm just going to show you the tools itself. If you've noticed, you've got a project sidebar on the side. I also have a Windows Phone project open in Visual Studio, and you'll notice it's almost the exact same thing. You've got a Solution Explorer here. In Visual Studio, it's called a Solution Explorer because there could be many projects in a solution. In Android Studio, it's more or less the same thing. Here's my application. Here's my actual app code. I can have several apps open, and I can change the way I view things. I can look at packages. I can do the same thing with Visual Studio. Hopefully you're able to see this very well. In Visual Studio, the equivalent of packages would be actually the class view, and you can navigate by classes, and it's pretty awesome. Going back to Android Studio, what we've got here is your standard edit tools. You can search, edit, view, navigate. You've got code, refactoring, analyze, tools, refactor, some more, building, running tools, and it's just really straightforward. If we go back to Visual Studio, you've got more or less the same menu options. In fact, you probably got a lot more in Visual Studio because Visual Studio does support other languages and does plenty of different things. And if you're into unit testing, which I hope you are because unit testing is extremely important, Visual Studio does have testing tools so you can run tests without having to write a test runner manually. The other thing is that we've got some neat architecture tools as well, so you can take a look at how your app is structured very easily. The analysis tools are more or less very similar, and here's a little demo with Visual Studio. The code editor itself is really cool. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So here's some code. You can actually navigate throughout the class using this drop-down. And you can see the functions and navigate through them.
Hey, maybe we should actually bump up the zoom a little bit.
Oh, yeah, right, we should.
Just so that everyone can see your fantastically written code.
Yeah, so this is C#
Visual Studio
code.
wrote for you.
Yeah, this is generated by Visual Studio. This is C# code. You can see that it's fairly straightforward styling, very similar to what you'd expect from a modern IDE. And if you've used Android Studio, I'm pretty sure you'll feel very comfortable inside Visual Studio. Most of it is the same. And this is similar to Eclipse as well. So without further ado, let's talk about what's new in Visual Studio 2013. If you've used Visual Studio before, you'll see what's new. And if you haven't, well, you'll see what's really cool and what's really hot and what just came out. So a smaller agenda for this part of the segment. We're going to talk about how Visual Studio is slowly moving towards becoming a connected IDE. We'll talk about the new themes and visual design of Visual Studio. I'll show you some of the cool editor productivity tools, and we'll take a look as well as at the IDE performance improvements and some performance tools and how you have some enhanced debugging tools as well.
So of course, it's that time when it's like, okay, so here we are, we're talking about comparing and contrasting. So of course someone has to throw a curveball for you. So Tom on the chat wants to know when we're talking about Xamarin.
We are not talking about Xamarin today, although Xamarin is a really cool tool. Unfortunately, it's not the focus of this presentation. We're actually going to talk about porting native apps to Windows Phone native equivalents.
So I brought that up only just because you said the connected IDE with all these different languages and stuff like that. So obviously Xamarin, and especially with 2013, all that stuff, like there's so much support for it now.
Yeah.
But that is for potentially another Dojo.
Yes, potentially another Dojo. Actually, most likely will be another Dojo.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, indeed.
Stay tuned.
Awesome, cool. So yeah, the connected IDE. So where are we going with this? Well, essentially, what we're moving towards with Visual Studio is being able to actually take a lot of the pieces of Visual Studio that developers use and have it placed in the cloud so that you can sync your settings. So you sign into an IDE on one machine, you go to another one, you sign in with your account, and it will take all of the settings that you've got and it'll seamlessly move them between the machines. You can synchronize your settings across all these different devices and just overall get up and running a lot faster. And that's something that's really cool. And I'm going to show you some of the other things that came with the whole idea of being connected. We have a notification center which helps you keep Visual Studio up to date. So in fact, just yesterday, I was opening up Visual Studio on this machine, which I haven't done in a while. And the thing that I noticed was that it actually popped up several of my extensions and add-ons needed an update. And that helped me out a lot because I noticed that, as you heard earlier, I do a lot of JavaScript development. Some of the extensions that I use to help me do Node.js development were updated. And with that came some really cool additions, and I was very happy to find that out. And if it wasn't for that notification center, I wouldn't have known, because these extensions, unless I'm using them day to day, I wouldn't notice if they were updated. So with the notification center, you can easily determine what's important. You can also address things later, so you don't have to do things and interrupt your workflow right away. And it's all in one common location, which is awesome. Now, moving on to themes and visual design, I know if you're coming from Eclipse, you're used to having the ability to change the theme of your IDE. Same thing with Android Studio, which is based off of a JetBrains system. We have the same thing now with Visual Studio 2013, and we've improved a lot of the visual design as well. So it's a little bit of a departure from what we did with 2012, but it's much more clear as a result, and it helps the developer release from the eye strain that they have spending the entire day looking at one IDE. So once you've got Visual Studio installed, you can go sign in, and immediately you'll be faced with a choice, which color theme you want. Now, if you don't like one, you can change it in the tools and options, and I'll actually do that live a little later just to show you how quick and easy it is. You don't even need to restart Visual Studio. It's awesome. So here's what they look like. You've got the dark one for those of you who are used to coding in a Vim terminal, for example, and want those darker colors. I actually do that at night. I switch my theme towards being darker just because it's less of a strain on the eye. But if you're interested in having a sort of more modern feel, you've also got the white theme as well as the blue theme.
So you know you're a geek when you go in and you change your themes based on the time of day that it is.
Yeah, man.
Okay, my GPS does that because it's in the car. You are stationary.
Yeah, I mean, like, it should be a hint that I should stop coding, but in fact, all it is...
Which, funny enough, he just said, by the way, not too long ago, that he hasn't touched Visual Studio in a while, but that's, I'm assuming you meant on this machine.
On this machine. No, yeah. I have another desktop machine with 2 screens. It's a lot easier to code for me. On this laptop, it's...
Just making sure, because on the one hand, you're saying, I change my themes based on the time of day.
Yeah, yeah.
I say this, but I don't know if you guys tuned into Breakpoint, which is actually another show that we have online. We just did live last Friday, which is now, by the way, also on demand on Channel 9, Breakpoint. Adam was making fun of me because he was using a dark theme, and I'm like, well, I like my development to be nice and optimistic and all, you know, I live in a bubble clearly, so I have my theme in Visual Studio all nice and bright. And he's like, well, I'm old school, so I like the old theme. And I'm just like, anyway, to each his own, clearly. The point is, you have Visual Studio your way. Yeah,
exactly. It's awesome. Yeah, like, I love switching into the dark theme at night simply because it's less of a strain on the eye and I can keep coding, especially when I'm in the zone. Like, you get into these zones. Like, it's just, you gotta keep coding. You don't stop. Like,
and this is how he, by the way, this is how he pumps out all the apps for developer movement, which he now can't do, but sadly. Yeah, but that's it. You know, like, coming out of school, I was used to this, like, working at night feel, having 24-hour coding sessions, and, like, you know, like, that's the way it is. And having an IDE that will let me change the themes is perfect because it matches, you know, my environment, what I'm doing, and it just helps me code better. So for you Java developers out there, Visual Studio is actually really that cool. We happen to, like, clearly we spend a lot of time in it, so obviously we're biased, but if you haven't tried yet, give it a try. You might just fall in love with it just as much as we do. Or just as much as we are. But anyway.
So what else is super cool is that you've also got an improved visual design, so that means better icons, the lines work better, especially in the white theme. It was a little bit of an issue earlier. The hover colors have changed, so is the active and inactive notifications on the UI. And what's really important is because we all have HD screens now, and high DPI is really important. In Visual Studio 2013, that's been improved a lot. So things like icons look much better now because of the high DPI changes. You can take a look at, on the screen, we can see where some of the icons weren't as great, but now they're much better. And the hinting as well on the UI itself is much improved. So jump into editor productivity enhancements. These are features that really help the developer as you're coding, and Coming from a background where I did a lot of coding in Vim, seeing these improvements in Visual Studio really made the change for me very easy. In fact, it made it so much better than what I was used to doing inside Vim in the terminal, building Android and iOS apps. Now I build Windows Phone apps, and for developer movements, that's what I need. Like, you can only do it with Visual Studio. And I port apps to Windows. See, that's Phone. That's it. Like, I can help you with your iOS and Android apps to port them to Windows Phone. I have that background, so if you've ever got any questions, don't be afraid to tweet at me. I'll happily find the answer or give you an answer if I know it. If not, I'll find somebody who does. We'll dig very deep, and then we'll get you what you need to know. So in terms of editor productivity, what's changed? You've got auto-brace completion now. It's easier to move lines up and down. You've got an enhanced scroll bar. There's a new Navigate to experience. So if you've seen the Navigate to earlier in older versions of Visual Studio, it wasn't as great as it is now. We've got Code Peek, which is very, very helpful. I wish I could do this in Vim, actually, to be honest. In the Ultimate version, we've also got Code Lens, which is a really cool new feature, and a few other enhancements all around the board to just help you become much more productive. Now, performance tools and debugging is very important, especially for Windows Phone and mobile developers. We really need to push the barrier of the mobile phone apps, because if it wasn't for these tools, we'd end up with sluggish apps. Like, we need to have performance tools and debugging tools that really help us get the most out of the devices that we're running our apps on. So among the really cool enhancements in Visual Studio 2013 is that suddenly you've got one launch point for all your profiling tools. Before, they were spread around more or less in different places, but now they're in one place. And that's going to be really helpful when it comes to time to finding out why my app is slow.
Not that it ever would be.
Not that it ever would be if you code right, but it could happen, particularly with network pieces. It tends to slow down. You got to be careful how you run things. And we'll actually show you a really cool thing that you could do with Windows Phone, especially when it comes to doing things apps with images. That's coming soon. In terms of the performance and diagnostics hub, you've got the ability to do analysis. This is going to be really important when you're ready to launch your app, put it in the store. You want to be able to do the same tests that the Windows Phone Store team does for your app, so you can find out what's missing, whether it's an icon or a background picture or anything that's going on. In terms of CPU utilization, this is really important. You'll be able to see how things are performing, especially when it comes to different methods and what's taking up most of your time, your CPU time, that is.